So first of all, good morning to everyone present here. So today is the last and final session for the year of the storyboarding journalism session. And today we have here with us Shadma Shaikh, who is an IIJNM alumna. So she has been working as a technology journalist, and she's also the co-founder of FactorDaily Media Labs, which is a not-for-profit newsroom which is focused on public interest journalism. So she writes stories that are focused on technology's impact on human life and society. She also talks about the internet culture and creator economy as well. So today, Shadma will talk about the importance of telling relevant and necessary stories that are, maybe stories that don't fall on the umbrella of breaking news, and about the importance of creating a niche for yourself as a reporter and the need to constantly upskill and evolve yourself. So welcome, Shadma. Now over to you.
Thank you. Happy to be here. All right, should we start?
Yeah.
Right. So my name is Shadma, like Nandana said. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm told that the prospective students are the audience for this session. So keeping that in mind, I wanted to talk a little bit about, my journey so far in journalism and, the things that have worked for me, things that haven't worked for me. To give you a little bit, information about myself, I think Nandana said that already. I am a tech journalist, and I am also the co-founder of a publication called FactorDaily, which is more focused on technology stories and technology's impact on society. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3-4 years. To start off, I think it makes sense to give you a little bit of introduction about how I got here. So I think I did my engineering earlier, like most journalists do these days, and then I knew that I wanted to write and write something that would inform people. So journalism seemed to be one of those career choices, and because I didn't know how to get into it, I thought the best way to transition would be to take up a course or go through an institute that can help you understand the ropes of the trade. I got admission in IIJNM, and I think that helped initially to kickstart the career that I was looking forward to. Because when you go through an institute like IIJNM, right, what happens is you get to know what the job is going to be like. You get to know what is it that you would like in that job, whether you want to write or you want to be in front of the camera or you want to produce stories. And not just that, you also get to know what kind of journalism would you particularly be interested in. Would you like political writing? Would you like business writing? Would you like science writing? So the process of going through all of those channels helps you understand what kind of career do you envision for yourself in journalism. So I think the course helped kickstart that journey for me. I want to talk a little bit about the publications that I have worked for and how it has helped me find exactly what is it that I want to do in journalism. So I was a part of the 2015 batch, and I liked business journalism. I took that as a specialization, and one of the things that I realized while I was studying it is also that business journalism or any specialized form of writing that you do, if it is science or technology, these are not counted among mainstream journalism, because you wouldn't be telling people updates every day. You wouldn't be giving people, stuff like, look, there's going to be a lockdown tomorrow, or, these are the number of cases that are rising. So you are not going to be informing people on a daily basis. But that doesn't mean that what you have to say is not important, because very often, all of these disciplines like medical sciences or, technology or business intersect with people's lives in different ways. And even if you don't have something to say every day, the stories that you do take time, but they inform people in a mindful way. They tell people that, here's what's happening, how it's going to affect you, here's what will happen, if this happens. So it's more than just, telling people, look, there's going to be something like this tomorrow. That's the difference between mainstream journalism and a specialized kind of journalism. So I started with a business newspaper called Deccan Chronicle in Bangalore, and I was a part of the business desk. So I remember one of the good things that happened to me initially was that the business editor was on a sabbatical for 3 months when I joined. I say that's a good thing because that gave me direct access to the resident editor Nina Gopal at the time, and a new reporter or a junior reporter doesn't get that kind of access very often in a big newsroom. So getting that kind of access also helped me understand how to go about doing stories, because I was directly reporting to the resident editor. So I knew that I had to pull up my socks, I had to do good work. So at DC, what I realized was, because I was a part of a business beat, you have to a business beat in a mainstream newspaper is essentially just one paper, right? It's not as important as what's happening on the front page or what's happening in the city. It's one page that they have to fill, but you have to write the kind of stories that you want to write, to be able to be noticed, to be able to get your bylines out. One of the things that I had to do at DC was attend all the press conferences that were happening in the city at that time. So one day it was aviation, another day it was telecom, the other day it would be coal and energy, IT, software, automobiles, all sorts of things. So a part of my job also involved attending all of these press meets. And then if there's anything important, then you go back and then you file it for the day. But I realized that, while you get to understand everything that's happening in every beat, and you get to learn all of these beats, you also have to find something that, you can develop an expertise in. And a lot of people who were senior to me at that time told me that it's good that you are covering all the beats in business, but it's also important that you find your own niche. And that is what has helped me get, a lot of, that has helped me a lot in my career, I would say. So I would cover all of these beats as a reporter, go to every event, take up as many meetings as possible. But while you're doing that, you also do your own individual stories. Because in a mainstream newspaper, when you're writing for a page like a business page, nobody's really going to push you to get those stories out. Because there are so many press releases that come out, and the page can be filled with that. But then if you have to do your own work, then you have to find your own stories, you have to do your own reporting, and you have to pitch your stories, get them out, get your bylines out as much as possible. Because that's the only way for you to progress further. Because it's one thing to write a press release, but when you're doing your own reporting, you get to know you get to know people, you get to know what's happening, you start thinking in a direction, and then you start getting better stories. So that's what helped me in DC. I think I was doing a lot of trend stories at the time, and a friend of mine told me that, listen, one of the things that I didn't like there was that sometimes I feel like nobody read those stories, because people don't buy mainstream newspapers to necessarily read these business trend stories. So one of my friends who was at ET told me that there's now ET is a business newspaper, so it will be a specialization in a way. So one of my friends told me there's an opening at ET, why don't you apply for it? And there what happened was the opening was at the startup and tech team. So essentially it's if there was like 2 business reporters at DC writing for one page, here there was like one whole business newspaper, and then there were 12 people who were writing for one page. So essentially what happens is it's a big team. You're all competing to get your story, your byline on that one page. So the environment is very different, the competition is very different. So it's very essential for you to make your own network, find your own contacts, and be on top of your beat. So even though the beats are equally divided, so to say, but everybody wants to do the best story. So a place like a business newspaper or a place like ET is very cutthroat in terms of understanding your own beat and finding your own beat. So that's how it helped me. And but pretty soon I realized that I didn't want to just do these short stories or do these trend stories that tell people what's happening. It has to go a little bit beyond that. There was a section in Economic Times called Power of Ideas, which used to be a 2000 or I think about a 1500 word column, a weekly column. And I started writing for that, and I realized that, long form writing is something that I am, more keen in doing. So at that time, FactorDaily was, I think it was 2017, yeah, 2017, 18, when, I started reading FactorDaily, because it was one of the only publications that used to cover specifically tech and go into depth when writing about tech stories, do long forms, do explainers. So I reached out to the editor, and then I eventually was a part of the team. So I mentioned this career path, to understand how do you find your own niche. How do you find what you want to do? So, for example, at DC, if I was writing a story about, say, how IITs are, the hunting ground for startups to hire fresh talent. At ET, that story would be more specialized. It would be about how artificial intelligence and data analytics is a skill that is being honed at IITs to cater to these tech startup hiring. Whereas at FactorDaily, that story would be about, say, a tech startup that is now making a social graph of blue collar workers using data analytics and AI for better employment opportunities. So I realized that, with each career move that I made, I was going more into the specialized kind of journalism, specialized kind of writing and reporting that I wanted to do. So that's how it helped me, and that's why I wanted to mention these three places where I worked and how I was able to get to what I really wanted to do and what I was good at, and what was also something that was in demand. Like, people wanted to read about it. So the readers of all of these publications are also very different. A reader of a mainstream newspaper like a Times of India or a Deccan Chronicle would be very different, because they want to know a little bit about everything. Just tell me what's happening around me. Whereas, the readers of Economic Times would be people who are interested, in business and what's happening in business. They're interested in, economy and stuff like that. And the readers of FactorDaily were even more, specialized readers who were more interested in technology. So you understand that you, as you evolve as a journalist, your readers also sort of evolve, and they sort of start, expecting some kind of writing or some kind of reporting from you. So one of the things that I also wanted to mention is that when you do reporting, like tech reporting, for example, right, or even science reporting, which is basically something that is very specialized, you have to remember that your job as a tech journalist has to be to simplify technology to people. The more technical any beat gets, the more you need to humanize it and make it relatable for readers. So if I'm going to talk about if I have to write a story about, say, surveillance or digital privacy, a story that will connect well with the readers is a story that would be about, say, how, marketing companies are using data from your phone to use targeted ads, because I know that directly affects me. So if you talk about it from the perspective of technology and how tech works, it doesn't interest your readers, but it will interest readers when you tell them how it affects them. So, similarly, if you have to write a story about what kind of technology food delivery startups are using to, deliver food in 15 minutes, you have to take them through the journey. The best way to do that is take them through the journey. You tell them that, what happens when you place an order. This is what you see on your phone. This is what the delivery person sees on their phone, and take them those through steps. So it can be explained to people in terms of how they can understand it. So one of the examples that, I think is a great example is, if you have to talk about technology, if you have to talk about NFTs, right? NFTs are very popular. So if I have to explain NFTs to somebody, there's a popular term on the internet called "explain to me like I'm 5." And I think that's something that all journalists should go by, because you don't have to dumb it down for people, but you explain to people in a way that it is leveling for everybody. Just because I have an expertise in tech doesn't mean it should be easy for me to understand, or just because I don't come from that background, I read something and I'm like, I don't understand this. So what's the point? So, this is what we, this is a principle that we go by, that, explain to me like I'm 5. So if I have to explain NFTs to somebody, if I say that, NFTs are cryptographic tokens that exist on a blockchain and, cannot be replicated, or, it's a non-fungible token or things like that, it's very difficult for people to understand what you're talking about, and they'll just flip the page or they'll just go to another website. But if I have to explain it, here's an example that I would use, right? Say you have a 500 rupees note and you basically exchange it for US currency. You would get around $6.2. If you have a 500 rupee note and you need change, you can get 500 rupees notes for it. So basically, the value of that 500 rupee note remains the same. You can exchange it for, diesel worth 500 rupees. You can exchange it for food worth 500 rupees. But the value of that $500 rupees stays the same. So the 500 rupees note is basically a fungible currency. It's a fungible token, which when you exchange, you can only get the value of 500 rupees. But if you were to get your hands on a specially minted, say 1 rupee coin, which hypothetically you say that, Queen Elizabeth gave to Jawaharlal Nehru as a parting gift on independence, right? India's independence. What do you think is the interchangeable item that you would exchange it for? I mean, if you give it, if you have to sell it in India, maybe it will have a very high value. But if you are, selling it on some remote island and people don't care about it, it might not have any value. So its value depends on where it's being shared, how it's being perceived. So if you had an option to sell that coin, what price would you consider? Maybe if you are giving it in a local market, maybe you just get 1,000 rupees for it. But if you're giving it to a collector who really values these items, maybe you will get $100 for it. So what I'm trying to say is essentially that the value of that coin changes according to how it's being perceived. So that unique coin is essentially a physical version of an NFT. So I think we went a little too much into NFTs, but what I'm trying to say is when you're explaining something that is a very technical concept to somebody who doesn't, to anybody, as a reporter or writer, you have to explain to people like they're five, basically. So I also realized while writing these stories that, I enjoyed writing about the impact of tech on humans the most. So it also has to be something relevant. So the more clearer your area of reporting is, the deeper you go into it, the more control you will have over your beat, right? You recognize trends, you know the ins and outs of your beat, you know that universe, and you become an expert in your beat. So I find that I feel that finding my niche as a social media reporter. So I mainly write on platforms. I write on what's happening on social media platforms. So someone who has to be on top of everything that's happening on social media. So reporting on troubling trends like cyberbullying on Instagram, for example, or age inappropriate content on YouTube, or even teens seeking mental health help on Discord. So I'm able to do those stories because I've been able to get a hold of this beat and market as my own. So it has helped me immensely in my career as a journalist because people all over the world are curious. They want to know about what's happening in terms of the digital and online culture in India. So when they read these stories, they want to know more about what's happening here. So when I do all of these stories, I get invited to talks, and I get invited to have an expert opinion on a story. Because my written work and there's this phenomenal global interest in that area. So my learning from this has been that when you find an area that you really really like, you have to go deep into it, know it in and out, and tell that story in different ways and perspective, but you cover all your bases in a story to the extent that when the reader reads that story or reviews that story or watches that story, they know everything that there is to know about that topic. So that is what has helped me immensely find and make this beat as my own. So I think one of the challenges, though, I mean, there are many challenges for journalists right now, but one of the challenges that I also wanted to talk about, and it's also a function of what I do, is basically the dwindling readership, which is something that we're all battling with, right? We do all of these great stories, but we don't see those stories reaching the right number of people, or the readership has fallen. So I think it's also a direct effect of the reducing attention spans, because most people consume news on their phones, and what you see on your phone is largely determined by algorithms that are written by big tech companies. So there is no way journalists can compete with these algorithms, right? Because there's abundance of information on the internet. But what's different is news is basically verified information. But there's tons of unverified, more sensationalized, palatable information available on the internet, in various appealing formats, like platforms like YouTube, Reddit, Discord, Twitch, TikTok, Instagram, and even Quora is filled with information or everything you would like to know about, except that that information is not always verified. No one is held accountable if that information is incorrect. You would often see, like, a lot of content creators now wanting to also talk about news or what's happening around you. So when a content creator on YouTube wants to break down a piece of news along with their own opinion on it, they are not representing a news organization whose reputation is at stake, right? There is no accountability if they say something incorrect. So essentially this, in my opinion, is sort of like an existential threat to journalists, because platforms are these platforms, social media platforms, are designed to be very addictive, unlike news platforms. So the new generation of readers are not going to read the newspapers. They are not going to, go to news websites and check all the stories. So they get, we should understand, we should accept this now, that, they get their news from social media. So I believe that it's also important for journalists to evolve with our audience, and not just think of stories in one format. Because for the longest time, like I said, I like long form reporting. And for the longest time, I was very happy doing it. And I was thinking that, oh, I'm doing all of these important stories that are very relevant and that are very important for the society. So I will read I will report very well, and I will write my 3,000 word piece, and everybody's going to read it. But that's not what happens. I remember I say, like, for example, if you write a very important story, right? I wrote about this story in 2019, I think, about how public WhatsApp groups that anyone can join, basically, and these were Indian WhatsApp groups, basically they were rife with child porn or child sexual abuse content. And we did that story in 2019. And when you do a story like that, it's very tough, because I had to sit through I had to watch some of those videos. I had to verify some of that content to be able to report it well. I had to take a virtual number, sign up for it, and then be a part of some of these groups and look at the content that was being shared on these groups. So when you do a story like that, I think what you expect in return is that there's some sort of accountability from the platform. You expect that they would clean up their act. They would have some sort of proper systems in place to deal with such content. But the problem is that what happens is, when you write a long form story on a website that basically has a very niche audience, it's likely that your story might not even reach the correct audience: the policymakers, child right activists, child groomers, or even young children who could potentially be a threat by something like this. Because not everybody is going to read English news. Not everybody would want to read a 3,000 word story, right? So you need to remember, and I learned it in the last few years, that your message or your story is more important than the medium. It's more important than where it's being shared. It's more important than what language is being shared in. So my job as a writer and reporter with of a story like this, or of any story, does not just end with its publishing, right? So I realized that as a long form writer, I would love to be able to make some of these stories that are really long stories into, say, for example, video formats for someone who doesn't want to read 3,000 words. Or if somebody wants to make, quick Instagram cards, so that, a Gen Z who's scrolling through their phone gets to know about it, because the message going out is more important than where it's going. So if you want young people to read news, we also have to be present where they are. We also have to evolve the way we tell our stories. Because when it comes to young readers, I think it's proven that, there's, with so much information available to us all the time, people have preferences over what kind of content they want to consume. Young people want to consume shorter, engaging content, or, audio stories, visual stories, data stories that present data in a more smarter consumption format, right? We know that a large percentage of Gen Z consumes their news from Instagram and Twitter. So I think that, instead of saying, why is this happening, we also have to sort of be prepared for it. And we also have to be there on those platforms. So we also have to look at social media as a medium or format of news reporting. So I know that a lot of journalists, when they do these stories, they post, important parts of their story. They do threads of these stories on Twitter with important bits of the story, or on Instagram, you can make a carousel of visual elements or text bits of the story that you think the Instagram audience would be more, it would be more palatable for the Instagram audience. So I don't think that newsrooms are right now at this point prepared for this. And I know that journalists don't have a guideline for this, but what I have seen in my experience and in the experience of the tech journalists that I speak to is that, journalists are also slowly learning and evolving with this. So you would see that there's no guideline to this, but but the most time you spend on these platforms, you understand how these platforms work and how you could use these platforms to basically spread your story. I personally know of journalists who also use Discord to build communities with their audience. In fact, for a bunch of my own stories, I've been able to use Discord not only to plug my story and tell people that, look, this is what I wrote and you should read this, but also to find like the right kind of people to speak to while reporting for the story. So in conclusion, like I think these are some of the things that I've learned in the past 2 years is that a story is only as good as the number of people that will be able to read it, and it also has to travel across formats and languages because if you write a story about, I remember I did the story for Mint a couple of months back about rural content creators not getting paid as much as urban creators, and not just that, they were also being targeted by scamsters and frauds, and they were trying to get into their accounts and stuff like that. And then I wrote that story for Mint, and there was like a lot of feedback that came in. There was a lot of conversations that it stirred up on Twitter and various platforms, and people started asking how can we help them, etc., etc. But the thing is that none of those readers could read the story because it was on Mint. It wasn't behind a paywall, thankfully, but it was on Mint. It was on the website. It was in English. So it's almost like the people that you write that story for cannot read that story. So I believe that we should also be collaborating with regional publications to translate our stories, to see that our work gets published across different languages. Because like I said, the message is more important than the medium. And one of the other things is that, you can't just say a story once and think that, okay, this is going to make a change or this is going to make a difference. You have to keep, some stories are the kind of stories that you have to keep doing again and again and again until, it reaches that one person, or it reaches a policymaker, or it reaches a person who can, really use that story and sort of, change their life. So some stories need to be told again and again. And one of the things that I had to unlearn is that basically you cannot be territorial about your work, right? I think when we are a part of a very busy newsroom, we tend to be very, protective of our contacts, of the kind of stories that we do, or of our bylines. And in the process, we sometimes tend to forget that, it's the work of the story is to reach more people. So the success of your story lies in how many people read it or watched it, and how did it basically move the needle a little bit, right? So if a publication wants to republish your work, by all means, let them do it. It will only increase the readership of your work. Send your work to local and regional publications and ask them to translate it in local languages and publish it. I would even say that, if a content creator wants to make a video narration of your story, by all means, set up your conditions with the creator, collaborate with them. I think one of the things that we're really bad at is collaboration, because we are almost always on our own, going out on our own beats, finding our own stories, being very protective about what we are writing and then getting it published. But I think that we are at this stage that we could benefit a lot from collaboration by working with each other, by working with people who are not necessarily journalists, but who might be great visual storytellers, audio storytellers, and, collaborate with them, learn skills from them, tell them what you know, and then instead of competing with each other, you work with each other and you produce better output so that, your message gets across. Because at the end, it's about the right message reaching the right people who can benefit from it, right? So essentially, that's all I wanted to say. One of the things that I also wanted to add is that apart from like all of the things that I mentioned earlier about, letting other publications publish your work and getting your work translated and all of that, some of those things are very difficult to do when you are a part of a mainstream organization, because because of the rules, obviously. Like you can't, if you've written a story for Mint, that story cannot be published in TOI, of course. So, there are some rules to that. But what I've realized in the last few years is that there are other avenues for people to publish their work rather than only being a part of a mainstream organization. So last year, I also took a little bit of a break, and I started freelancing a bit, and I realized that, a lot of people in our country, when they look at journalism, they only look at 5 top media houses and think that this is what it is. If I don't have a choice, and a lot of people opt out of journalism, or they quit journalism, or they will do it for 5 years and they'll be like, every place is the same, so what's the point? And then they move into ancillary roles like PR, or they'll do something else, or they'll do content writing. So I just want to tell people that there are a lot of options available in journalism. Also, you can do freelancing. You can also apply for a lot of fellowships. I mean, it's not as popular in India, but if you look at the West, fellowships are very popular. There are some resident fellowships that you can be a part of. You just have to apply for the program and the selection process and all of that. But I would encourage everybody to look up freelancing and fellowship opportunities that are available to journalists, that are available to a lot of young journalists also. In fact, FactorDaily has recently launched a FD Young Fellowship program, which involves a 3-month internship and then an immersive experience in deep societal journalism. So if that's something that interests you, read our work, write to me with pictures and on what topics motivate you, and why, and we can talk about that. So that's what I wanted to end with, that, besides the regular mainstream newspapers that you know of, there are a lot of opportunities available for journalists. It gets easier after your first few years, after you know a few people, after you know a little bit about how the industry works. It gets easier, it gets better. But there are, like I said, there are other avenues of you wanting to publish your work the way you want, with your conditions. If you don't want your story behind a paywall, you can always request the publication that, listen, I will give you the story, but is it possible that you don't put it behind a paywall? Sometimes you have to take a pay cut, but I think it makes sense in the overall scheme of things that you get to decide where your story gets published. Like I said, some stories are better published in regional newspapers because their reach is higher, and because it's about, if you're writing about the people who are going to read those newspapers, then by all means, it makes sense for you to publish your stories there instead of publishing it in, say, an Economic Times or a Mint. So yeah, essentially that's what I wanted to end with.
Okay, thank you, Shadma. So if we have any questions, we can take them right now. So while we wait for people to ask questions, I would like to ask a few. So I think recently the Indian government has come down with a lot of new rules and laws they've proposed at least to monitor digital news. And I think Indian government and the Twitter especially is in a bit of a tiff with each other.
Yeah.
So how do you as a tech journalist especially see this new developments coming into journalism and coming into Twitter especially?
I think Twitter's always had this, right? Twitter's always been on and off with the government. And I think that's something that's going to happen. But I think that we can't have like a platform dependency. Like I see a lot of journalists being very, very active on Twitter. And, they look at Twitter as the only place. Like sometimes I also fell into that trap where you only look at the number of retweets or the number of, comments your story has gotten, or the feedback that your story has gotten on Twitter. But Twitter is very, very small. Like maybe there are tech journalists and business readers who are present on Twitter, but the stories that you're writing are far reaching. So I think we have to stop thinking about a certain platform. And there are so many platforms, and people are using all of these platforms. There are open source platforms now. So I believe that I'm of the opinion that giving too much power to any platform is detrimental to the freedom of speech. So I think that the government thing will keep happening. Like there's nothing we can do about it. But when it comes to platforms and how much we use platforms, it's important to also diversify and be present across different platforms, because people are using those platforms. So if you want to reach them, you also have to make use of those platforms.
Okay. And also, you talked about working for smaller media houses and, finding your own niche. So what are the few challenges or advantages that you faced while working or running a small independent media house?
Yeah, so the challenge is like I'll talk about freelancing also a little bit here, because I feel like that's like, you know, the portal to going into a smaller newsroom. I think initially, once you spent a few years in the industry, you know how business journalism works, or you know how tech journalism works, for example, right? You know that a certain publication will accept a certain kind of stories. So, you know, essentially, what happens is when you think of a story, you also think of a publication, and then you think that this story will fit well in this publication. So you know, you write to them and you tell them that, you know, this is the story that I want to do, and then you negotiate your contract with them or whatever. And to be able to do this, you have to spend a few years in the industry, is what I learned. I got more confident about it after I had worked at all of these places and I knew how these places worked. And if I have to talk about smaller newsrooms, so yes, it's challenging, but one of the things that we've learned in the last few years is that, you know, you don't have to have like the costs are not very high, right? So what we do is we work with a lot of people who freelance for us. We work with a lot of designers who are interested in the kind of work that we do. So because you know, Factor Daily is very mission driven, you have to also find like-minded people who also align with the mission. So they're not just doing it because you're paying them, but they also do it because they believe in what you're doing. So essentially, to keep it a little low cost, what you can do is you can have you know, people who believe in the mission, and not everything is going to be a full-time role. You can hire freelancers. You can essentially, I would encourage people to work with not just journalists but also other people. There are some great designers out there who can do very good, you know, visual. A visual makeup for your story, for that matter. There are people who are not journalists, but they're very good with data, and they can help you with presenting your data in a very small format. So not just restrict yourself to finding a 4-year experienced journalist or 5-year experienced journalist to do a certain kind of work, but also see what kind of talent is out there and how we can collaborate and, you know, do stuff together. So that is one of the learnings that we've had.
Okay. So you talked about paywall and you know, requesting houses not to put your stories behind a paywall, subscription model, and all of that. So, but when it comes to digital media, it's still relatively new, isn't it? So, how do you find that balance between sort of ad revenue and this paywall model? Because
it's very hard, Nandana. So that's why we have gone the non-profit route, to be honest. It's very difficult, because in the end, it's like, you know, something ends up becoming like a problem or like a challenge for you, because if it's not ad revenue, then it's paywall, and then even if it's paywall, I mean, it's so guarded, right? It's access journalism, essentially. Only the people who can afford like 1,200 rupees a month will be able to read this information that I am writing. So I think that that's sometimes I feel like that's even worse than, you know, ad revenues, because you are restricting your stories to only a certain set of people. So I think you know, this profit kind of attitude when it comes to journalism, it somehow just dilutes the purpose. So I think it's very difficult to find like a good balance between, you know, making money and doing this. So currently we have a few people who have given us grants. So we are running on the basis of those grants, and then there are a lot of people who want to see good journalism, who want to see good work, who keep pushing us to do this. So I think that model has worked for us. There are a bunch of other publications in India who also do this. So because it's you know, purpose driven, I think it makes more sense to stay this way.
Yeah, so I was going through your stories on Factor Daily, and I saw that a lot of it is geared towards Gen Z or the teens and the upcoming, you know, generation, which is understandable because the most number of technology users will be from that younger generation, and these are the people who will be using new social media platforms and new avenues, while the older ones will be take a little bit more longer to catch up.
Right.
So while you're talking about teen problems and their mental health issues and all of that, so how do you ensure that the stories that you do reach that audience? You know, that you're able to reach Gen Zs as well, not just you know, very specialized audience who are very much into business news.
Correct.
or technology news.
This is something that I'm still learning, but I would say that, you have, like I said, you have to be present on the platforms where the teams are present. So I downloaded, I didn't know what Discord is. I downloaded it, I learned it. I spent a good amount of time on it to understand why is it so popular among the Gen Z, right? You should go and see on Reddit. I mean, it's wild. It's the kind of information that's
I
present.
love Reddit.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, you can it's like a black hole. It can just suck you in. So I think what I'm learning is that because I also report on these platforms, it's important to be present on these platforms, not just for reporting, but also finding a way to, like I said, tell those stories. So I would love if somebody would make a 2-minute video out of my story and put it on Instagram, because I know that my story is targeted to Gen Z and they're more likely to find it there. So, like I said, I think newsrooms are slowly understanding the importance of also being present on various formats, various platforms. We don't have the skill for it yet. Like, I can't turn my story into a 2-minute video, or I don't know how to, make it more appealing to a Gen Z. But I think we should very quickly be getting into that role where we understand that, listen, there are various ways of telling a story. I think we were thinking of doing this campaign where you give people a 3,000 word story and tell them that, can you make this into a five visual card element and tell this story in this way, because like I said, like, some people prefer audio stories, some people prefer data stories. So if you want to reach maximum audience, you have to diversify your formats, you have to diversify what platforms you are on, what languages you're speaking. That's the only way to do it.
And also, tech literacy in a country like India is quite poor when you think about other countries. So how do you counter that? And also the lot of misinformation and WhatsApp, the kind of fake news that is being spread, all of that on every social media platform, not just WhatsApp or Facebook. It's there everywhere. It's pervaded every sort of social media platform. So how do you, as a tech journalist, is it even possible to counter that at this point?
I think there's too much information to handle, right? To everybody. Like very often, we also end up reading stories where we are not sure if it's fake or real.
Yeah.
So I think that mindfulness has to be developed among people, and people just tend to read and believe what they want to believe, right? So I think there are some publications that have these fact checkers now, and they have these, I think they have these WhatsApp groups where if you find a piece of information that you think is incorrect or might be fake, you send it to them, and then they do the verification, and they put a story out saying that, we received this tip and we verified this information. This is correct or this is incorrect or something like that. And I think a lot of large tech companies like Google and all are also coming up with initiatives in terms of understanding that whether a piece of information is correct or incorrect. So I think it's not a journalist. I don't think it's just a journalist's problem. It's everybody's problem because it's very big to counter. So I think if everybody works together, maybe we can, slightly make it better. Like only slightly, though. I don't think it's going to go away completely.
On that note, so if we don't have any more questions from the audience, I think we can wrap up the session. So thank you, Shadma, for being a part of this. It was really interesting. And I think technology and tech literacy, all of that related to humanities, is something that you don't really hear mainstream journalists talk about as much. So thank you for all your insightful tidbits and all the anecdotes that you shared. So thank you for being, okay, sorry. Ashwin has a question here, I'm sorry. So he's asked, why do videos posted by individuals get viral quickly than professional journalists?
Yeah, that's true. And it's very clear why that happens. And I think I mentioned it briefly. So the thing is that these platforms, right, they have made their algorithms in such a way that they know what people like, right? So creators or content creators who make these videos that you're talking about, Ashwin, that go viral, right? They also know the ropes of how, say, an Instagram works. So they know what will work well on Instagram. as opposed to a journalist who doesn't know what will work well on Instagram. So I am going to write a 3,000 word story, which might be boring for you. But if a content creator is going to do a 20-second video, that's very interesting. That has a lot of visual elements. That's, our mind works that way, right? Like if you look at something that is colorful, that is appealing to you, or that is designed in a way that, you would want to read it or watch it or something like that, then of course you would prefer that over a 3,000 word story that I'm writing. So it's basically a battle for attention, but the battle is going to be won by platforms if journalists don't understand that we also have to modify the way we tell our stories. We also have to make use of these platforms. So that's the difference. That's what I was talking about earlier. So a professional journalist doesn't know how to use Instagram very well, as opposed to a content creator who does that as their day job.
Okay. Do you have any more questions, Ashwin, that you would like to ask?
He said, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much, Shadma, being a part of it. And thank you to all of those who participated as well. On behalf of IIJNM and myself, thank you again, Shadma.
Thank you. Bye-bye.